Hi guys, we are gonna paint this fall door hanger right here. If you have your kits, you have your paint and you have a 12-inch round that looks like this. We are gonna go ahead and get started. You're gonna start out with some white and either really dark gray, which is what's in the kit, or some black. I have the wrong one on my plate, but that's okay. It's gonna turn out pretty close anyway. So what I want you to do is take about half of your white and make a gray that you like. Okay. I like that gray pretty well. It's kind of a in the middle gray. I'm not gonna mix it in completely. I've still got a little streaking of paint. And I'm just going to fill in my gray, where my gray lines are gonna go. So I'm gonna show you this one more time. So we have 1, 2, 3, and a quarter or a third, something like that down there. So we're just gonna fill these in haphazardly, nothing too perfect. I'm gonna kind of go around the edge and then sweep out. That way I don't get too much paint on the edge of my piece. All right, and it doesn't have to even be filled in that much. You can just start in the middle and sweep out. Add a little more black. You can always lighten it up a little bit. All right, let's put some of that up there. We're gonna paint over this, so that's why I was saying it doesn't have to be completely perfect. We're gonna put our lines in place and then we're more or less going to paint over them and then bring them back. All right, that's good enough. Keep going. Good enough for that one. And this one down here. All right, that's good enough. I should be able to find that when I need it. All right, I'm gonna hit it with a blow dryer. Rinse out this brush and go with the same brush. Just make sure you get all the water off of it. You don't want soupy paint. There is a place for soupy paint, but we don't need it right now. Okay, so we're gonna go and fill. You could paint, you could paint the whole thing, if you want. You can go right over top of those lines, which is sometimes the easier way to do it, or you could just fill in your white lines where your lines were at. You want to completely fill in this white. If you go over a little bit, you're going to be able to see where your gray is at. And like in this one, you can see the lines are not perfectly straight. It's got a very dry brushed look. Now, if you want it to be super crisp, then what you might want to do is paint your gray stripes and then tape them off. Let them dry really good, blow dry them, get them really good and dry, and then tape them off. Or you could do it the other way around. You could tape off before you start, and then do it that way. But I feel like this way is kind of the quickest, easiest way to do it. And I don't mind the lines, losing the lines a little bit. I think it looks nice and helps add to the whimsy of the piece. We are not in the perfection business doing this. So you want to, you don't want your lines to be completely wonky. You would like to keep them fairly horizontal. But as long as you're mostly there, I think you'll be happy with your piece. Again, I'm kind of trying to sweep out away from the edges so I don't get too much of a buildup on the sides. Right. Gray's a little see-through in a few places. I'm gonna add a little more white to it, just here and there, and then I'll go back and add a little more gray. I'm doing that once my brush is mostly dry. I'm just dry brushing some white into some of the gray in a few places. Completely optional. And our pumpkins are going to hide a lot of it, especially down here at the bottom, so I don't have to worry too much. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm only painting this other one about a third of the way or so. That way I don't have to work so hard to cover it up once I get my pumpkins on there. Up here, you'll have to work a little bit to cover up some of your gray, because orange is a very transparent color. And you can go out and buy more expensive paint and find an orange that's not as transparent, but I don't think it hurts anything to just paint a couple of coats on there. Maybe it'll make it last a little longer in the long run. Okay. All right. All right, I'm just gonna wipe off my brush and pick up some more gray and kind of wipe it off. I don't want a lot of gray on my brush, and I'm just gonna go over my gray again. You know, if there are any places where I don't like the line, I don't like what I just did, but that's okay. If you don't like when you do something, let it dry and then go back and fix it. But sometimes if you just let it dry and look at it, hold it out at arm's length and try not to be so worried about it being perfect. A lot of times when you make a mistake, you can just live with it. It adds a little character to the piece. The thing is, you just don't really want the wood to show through. So if you get to this point and your wood is showing through, then you definitely want to go back and add a little more paint in places. All right, and then when you get it how you want it, toss your brush in the water and blow dry. Mine can stand a little more white, so I'm gonna do that really quick. Make sure my brush is really, really dry. All right. All right, now, once you have your stripes, you want to get it as dry as you possibly can. Because our next step is going to be doing our traceable. And if you have wet paint at all, you will pick up the paint instead of transferring the carbon onto your piece. Now, if you don't have carbon paper, you can color the back of it with chalk or a pencil. You just want to completely cover it with chalk or pencil. So that would be like, use the side of the pencil or chalk. Just completely cover everything on the back. And it will work basically the same way as what we're doing with the transfer paper or the carbon paper. All right, so if you have the traceable, you want to line it up on your circle, and the stripes may or may not match. My stripes are a little wonky on the traceable. They're just kind of a guideline. So this is what you want to look for when you're placing your traceable. You've got holes up here, so you want to keep everything, you know, as horizontal as possible, but it's a pretty forgiving piece, so if you don't get it exact, it's no big deal. You don't want your vines or these little side pieces to go off the side. They should be fairly even on both sides. Just have a smidge of space between the side of the piece and where they stop. That's what I'm trying to say. And then your pumpkins are going to come right down to the bottom of the piece. So mine kind of folds over right there, hangs over there, It's gonna hang over right there. Can you see that? All right, when I get it where I want it, I'm gonna tape it in place. And then I'm gonna take my carbon paper, dark side. I'm gonna take the dark, see on this carbon paper, in one of the classes, their paint wasn't quite dry, so it lifted the paint instead of laying down the carbon. So I hope this one works all right. We're gonna stick it under there and give it a shot. So I've got my traceable down. I'm gonna lift it up, slide my carbon paper underneath. All right, and if you have a small piece, you just move it around as you need. All right, I also, when I trace on a traceable, I like to use a colored pencil so I can see where I've traced. And I already used a pink pencil on this, so I'm gonna go with green this time. Start with the letters. And if you guys want to know the original artist on this, I'll have to look it up for you. I let you know on the other one that we did, the Christmas one, but this one I forgot. So I will try to reference that in the comments of the video. I already did this video for you guys once and it disappeared. I don't know what happened to it. I got ready to post and it was gone. So I have a few extra door hangers if anybody would like one. All right, if you haven't already traced this pumpkin, I had a few people who didn't really like how it looked because of the way it just looked like it needed to be longer. So all you have to do is just take this line out a little bit further and curve it back down a little bit later. So if you can see where my line's at, it's not perfect, but it'll look a little bit better. And just bring it out a little bit further right here on the right. All right, now I recommend doing this halfway through, and I just buzzed right through it. So halfway through, I would recommend hold your tape down and just kind of peel everything back and check to make sure it's transferring, making sure, you know, you're pressing hard enough, you're not pressing too hard. And then at the end, go back and check it one more time to make sure that you didn't miss anything. It looks like I got it all. Pull that right off. All right, I'm gonna let you guys see this one more time before we get started painting, kind of as a reference. All right. We're gonna start with orange just because it is a transparent color and it'll take a few coats to cover up the gray in some places. And we're gonna add some white highlights and some brown and all of that to, you know what, let's not do that first. Let's do the brown first because I don't want you to lose your lines. Sometimes you might tend to lose your lines. So what I want you to do is you can go ahead and fill in your pumpkin stems. Let's just do that first. Little detail brush is probably not what I should have picked up for this, but I didn't want to go hunting another one, so we'll just go with it. And if your paint is a little thick and hard to spread around, just add a little water to your brush. These are kind of weird looking stems, but we're going with it. All right, also what I want you to do is if you have a Sharpie or just a pencil laying around, darken up this line right here for your F. In our class, it was, we had a lot of issues with it getting lost under all the layers of paint. So if you do it with Sharpie, it's gonna pop out and you'll be able to see it for sure. If you do it with pencil like I'm doing right here, you might have to go over it a couple of times. And just keep an eye on that bottom of your F so you don't lose it. And I just kind of lost it again, so we'll fix it. It's okay. All right, so for the stems, let's do the, well, I say stems, it is stems. I'm gonna grab just a little bit of black to mix in with my brown to do the stems on the side, the ones that go around. I need a little bit of water because it's pretty thick. All right, I'm just gonna mix that together until it's a little looser. You want it fairly thin. And then you want to take the smallest brush that you have. I'm using my detail brush, and I'm gonna kind of soak out the water on a paper towel. I'm gonna put it in my paint and twist it and pull it back while I'm twisting to get a sharper point. And then when I do the stems, I try to start at the bottom of the stem and then run out of paint as I go up. That way the bottom of the stem is thicker than the top. Also, as you go up, lighten up on your pressure, and that will help it to look smaller at the top. That's basically the biggest problem people have with stems of any kind, or like tree branches. You want them, in nature, they're much thicker toward the base than they are at the top. And so as long as it looks like your base can hold what you're painting onto it, you're probably going to be in pretty good shape. So if you get a place where you get it too thick up at the top, try going back down to the bottom of the same stem and thickening it up a little bit and see if that helps. And I'm also at the ends of these trying to flick it just a little, but you may want to practice that on a paper plate or a piece of paper. A very gentle flick, nothing crazy. All right, it looks like it goes out a little further. Okay, I'm going to come over here on this side and do the same thing. Start towards the bottom, put more pressure toward the middle and the bottom of the stem. And lighten up my pressure as much as I can when I get to the end of it. Now I'm going to take, I like to use an angled brush for this. I'm just going to pick up some of that brown, and I don't want it to be super dark, so I'm going to brush off a little bit of it. And I'm going to find these lines on the pumpkins that I don't want to lose and add what I'm going to call a shadow behind them. So I'm just kind of trying to trace behind them a little bit so that I can find these lines. Okay, and you just want to do it where the pumpkin's touching the pumpkin. You don't want to go outside the pumpkin on the right or left or on the tops up here. I'm gonna kind of pick this up so maybe you can see it a little better. Okay. All right, and you can see the difference in my lines. I really was trying to do more of a dry brush like these, but when I forgot to wipe some of the paint off, I got a more crisp line. And either way is fine. It just depends on what you like. All right. Now that shouldn't take very long at all to dry. Just kind of put your hands on it, make sure your brown is not still wet. You can hit it with a blow dryer if you want, and then we're just gonna go in and fill in our pumpkins. We're just gonna paint over everything because it's the quickest way to do this, and we don't have to worry about detail too much just yet. Now, I do recommend kind of following the lines, if that makes sense. Your pumpkins are round, so you want your strokes to be round. That's gonna help the finished product look better. Probably could have used a larger brush. Let's do that. Oh yeah, that works better. Because really I'm just trying to fill things in right now. We'll come back later and make it look nice. You can kind of watch my strokes and see what I mean by following the shape of the pumpkins. So while you can paint over everything down here in the pumpkins, you do want to try to keep your strokes nice. You just have to be careful toward the edges so you don't have to paint over your white again. All right, once you get those filled in, just gonna let the pumpkins dry. We're gonna move on to something else. All right, let's go ahead, do our leaves and our flowers. Get my green and my pink out. All right. Just gonna fill in this pink and then we'll come back later and add our detail. I like that pink paint. It's pretty thick. You may or may not need a second coat. I'll probably put a second coat on mine. We're gonna let that dry. We're gonna work on our leaves. I'm gonna try my detail brush. I feel like it's probably a little small for that, but we'll give it a shot. Okay, and this green I feel like is a little darker than what I really like. So I'm gonna pick up a little white and mix it with my green. Just to lighten it a smidge. Now you could use some of your yellow if you want, but I think for what we're doing, the white looks a little better. I'm gonna turn it so I don't put my arms in it. We're just, like we're coloring a coloring book sheet, we're just filling in the lines right now, and then we'll go in and add all the other good stuff once we get this part done. And if I have a leaf that I feel like is over top of another one, Okay, this is one of those things that's part of the good stuff. But if I have a leaf that I feel like is over top of another one, I'm going to add just a little more white to it so that it looks like it's on top. When you have something lighter, it brings it forward, and when you have something darker, it pushes it back when you put them on top of each other. So you see how that kind of layers that up? So since I've got this kind of lighter green already on my brush, I'll go ahead and do this leaf since it's kind of on the top. And I'll come up here at the top and do it too, since, you know, I've already got that going for us. All right, and kind of wipe out my brush. Pick up the darker of the two. All right, and then if you flub it up like I did, it's not too bad. You can go back and touch that up after it dries. Don't try to touch it up while it's still wet. All right, so since I'm in this darker of the mixture that I made, I'm gonna go on this side and do the leaves that I feel like are further back or behind other ones. Probably should have done this on the other leaf, but that's okay. I hope you guys can see, and I hope I did not just, I hope I don't keep sticking my head in this. I have to go back and watch. Let me know if my head gets in the way too much. All right, I'm gonna go in with a lighter green. All right, since it's behind that pumpkin, I'm trying to do just a little line of darker green right there. Trying to work that in. I still want the front of it to be in front of that other one. I'm trying to work it in a little bit. There we go. That works. Did the same thing down here on this one because it's behind the flower. Let's see if we can blend that in. Make it look nice. Okay, so I just put a little dark down near the base and put the lighter up at the top. But my dark is already kind of dry, so just add a little more. So I'm gonna pick up a little dark at the base. I'm gonna pick up my light. Come back up here. See if I can work it together. so that it is darker at the bottom than it is at the top. That didn't really work, so I'm just going to take a little more dark, just put it around the bottom and flick up to kind of blend it in. All right, now this leaf right here should be all the lightest green. And if that stuff bogs you guys down, you know what? You can just paint it one green, and then we're gonna put some little veins in the leaves later that will separate it, so you really don't have to worry too much about it. I wanna teach you as much as I can, but I don't wanna stress you out. I want this to be fun for you. All right, we're gonna go back to our pink. And while we're doing that, I'm gonna wash this detail brush out and pick up just a little blob of pink and do some little flowers. I say little flowers, they're really just little dots at the ends of some of these twigs. You don't have to put it on all of them. And I can't remember on the traceable. Did my traceable have it? Oh yeah. The traceable down here did have some twigs. So if you don't want to lose those, you could go over those with Sharpie too. Just the biggest parts, so you don't lose them. But don't really paint them yet, because we'll come back to it. I'm just going to go back over my F really quick so I don't lose it. All right, that should help me enough. All right, flowers. We'll come back and do this to this one in a little bit. Right, and while we've got this brush out with pink paint on it, let's go ahead, if you need to, and do one more coat of pink on your flower. Okay, put a little bit of yellow on my plate over here with my orange, and let's work on these pumpkins. I'm gonna work on the back one first, so I want it to be the darkest. Remember, darker further back, lighter further up, but I do want to add some yellow to it. So I'm gonna take some of my orange and add just the tiniest bit of yellow. Maybe a smidge of white, just to lighten it up a little bit, okay? All right, it's not doing much, so I'm gonna add a lot and get it where I want it. All right. See if you can see the difference in those two. So what I wanna do is follow my pumpkin around, the little shapes, little wedges of pumpkin. I'm gonna try not to do the bottom quite as much because I want it to stay dark. And I'm gonna try to avoid these darker areas a little bit so that I have a little bit of a shadow. You can even take your finger and kind of rub the paint off of those areas. I'm going to do the same thing with the middle wedge that I've got going on. Follow my shapes around. Okay. And if you accidentally go over someplace like on the sides that you want to keep dark, you can just rub it. Rub the paint off, or down here on the bottom. Okay. I'll do the same thing on this section back here. Go along the outside edge. Fill it in. But up close to the other sections, I'm going to wipe it off. I'm actually going to wipe all of that because it was too much paint. Okay. All right, and then I'm going to take, it's still wet, I'm going to take a little bit of yellow and a little bit of white on my brush, kind of wipe it off, give myself a highlight on this pumpkin. All right, so just kind of play with it, see what feels right. You can always paint over it if you don't like it. So I don't want a lot of highlight on this guy, but I do want a lot on the top, and I want a lot more on this left-hand side. So I like that on this pumpkin. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and work on the one to the right, and I'm gonna work with this section that I mixed up for the pumpkin in the back. And I'm gonna add just a little more orange for this part right here, because I kind of want this part just to disappear, because it's between two sections and I want it to be really dark right there. So we're not gonna do a lot with it. It's just gonna be orange, and we can add some brown later if we need to kind of make it disappear more. Okay, we're gonna go and do this part of it. We're just trying to fill in this wedge. Okay, we can just wipe it off if it gets on our shadow. Right, and then I'm gonna pick up a little bit of this yellow and white. Put my little highlight right there. I'm gonna do the same thing with the middle. Maybe pick up a little more yellow, so I want it to look like it's in the front. That's probably a little too much yellow. Pick up a little more of that mixture. Work it around in that section. Okay. All right. Do the same thing with the back. Just keep it off of your shadow if you have one. If you don't, you can go back in and add one. Okay, so I'm going to add a little highlight to this little guy right here. I'm going to have a little more white in there too. Just put a few streaks of white and work it around. Still pretty wet, so I shouldn't have any trouble getting it worked in there. All right. I feel like this back guy still needs a little more. There we go. Just make sure to curve your highlights when you do highlights. Curve it with your shapes so it looks like a highlight and not just a random stray mark. Okay. And if it's not popping like you want it to, just wait till it dries and add some more. I'm going to mix up some more of this orange, yellow, and white. And fill in my little sections with this little guy. See if I can keep my big head out of the way so you guys can see. All right, I feel like he got a little too light, so I'm gonna add a little more orange. I'm gonna wipe off my brush and pick up just the orange. Put it around the edges and at the bottom. The edges where my shadow is. There we go, it's better. Okay, and then I'm gonna wipe off my brush and grab some yellow and white to do highlights. All right, so that's our pumpkins. If you have lost more of your shadow than you want, all you have to do, I would just leave this color in the brush and pick up some brown and wipe it off. Wipe it off on your paper towel till you have just the tiniest amount. Let's see, I could use a little more right here and just, didn't wipe off enough. There we go, dry brush that in there. And if you get too much, once it's dry, just go back and paint in that section that you don't like. I'm trying to make this a little darker right here, right here. All right, I think I'm happy with that. I'm gonna grab that detail brush again. I'm gonna go in and paint this. If it's dry enough, you can go in and paint this stem again. If you're feeling froggy with it, pick up a little bit of green with your brown. All right. Okay, and then we can go and do this little twig right here in front. So we're gonna loosen up that paint if it got thick. Use your detail brush, load it up. And we'll put our little flowers on it. All right. We're gonna pick up a little dot of yellow, a little blob of yellow on our brush. We're just gonna add yellow to some of these little pink flowers. Again, you don't have to do it to every one. All right, I'm just going back and forth with this detail brush now. Let me get the other one. I have two, and they're the same identical brush, but one of them I like better than the other. Okay, so I'm gonna get this dark brown, I'm just going to do some veins in the leaves. And next I'm going to add some detail to the flower. So let me show you on this one. They're just little, so you can see a C right there. And then these are like really loose U's almost. See on this one, there's a little C and just some little lines. So we're gonna start with the dark. I'm gonna do my little C shape in the middle of this flower. And that one's the backward C. Maybe I'll make this one a regular. And I'm just going to do a couple more little swipes with the dark. Okay. I'm going to go back with yellow and do the same thing. Just going to do 2 or 3 places with it. Leave a few spots because then you're going to do white. And you don't want too much white. You just want to highlight a few places. There we go. Okay, just like that. We're almost done, guys. All we have left is our letters, I think. Am I missing anything? All right, so far so good, I think. I hope you guys are enjoying doing this one. If you have any trouble or something's not turning out the way you wanted it to, send me a picture and a message and we'll talk through it and I'll see if I can help you. There are several ways you can do letters, and we've probably talked about this before, but just in case I've got somebody who hasn't done a kit before, who hasn't painted with me before, if you're doing something that's going to be inside, or you've got a door hanger that is going to be behind a storm door with not much, much weather affecting it, then you may not necessarily have to do a sealer on it, but I would recommend a high quality clear sealer. You can get at Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's. I like the matte. And when you seal it, you're just going to do a really light coat. You spray it, and you have to do it when it is, I think, 60 degrees or above. So that could affect your little door hanger if you don't have a place to spray it where it's warm enough. So anyway, you're going to do a really light coat to start with, just barely mist it to start with. And then the second coat, you can do it a little heavier. And then the third coat, you don't want to do it too heavy because it'll run off, but you'll kind of get the idea once you do it. So what I was saying is there are several ways you can do these letters. You can do a chalk marker. I like the ease of using a chalk marker, but when you spray coat a chalk marker, there's a chance it's going to run if you're not super careful. So you have to do the lightest of light first coats and a super light second coat just to make sure it's really sealed in before you go and put a really good, maybe third or fourth coat on it. You also want to make sure you get the size when you're sealing it. You can also use a paint marker. Paint markers are a little more expensive. They dry up quicker, which is why I don't really like using them. But they're not going to be affected so much by your sealer. And then the other way, which I'm going to show you today, is with a paintbrush. So let's do that. I've got my favorite detail brush, and you can also use, whatever brush you're comfortable with. Lots of people like round brushes. Sorry, I didn't have my brushes out. Lots of people like a round brush for lettering. It's not my favorite, but not for this kind of lettering when you're trying to trace something. And then I also like, for the bigger parts of these letters, you can use a flat brush. Can you see that? You know, when it fits in the sides. So I'll show you kind of with both of these brushes. I'm gonna use, you know, I thought about doing pink for the lettering on this. I hope you guys will not mind that. You can do yours with black. That's how the original was. I'll show you again. And I may go back and paint over it with the black, but I'm gonna try pink this time just because I have several of them and they're all black letters. So I'll try this and see how it looks. All right, so I'm just gonna start with the thickest parts of the letter. Try to follow it with this brush and turn your brush sideways when you need to make it thinner, to make the thinner lines, I mean. In some places it's just not gonna fit, but it doesn't have to be perfect, and you can just follow it around and make it a little wider if you need to. That doesn't bother me too much. I don't love that. Okay, so I like my detail brush better. I'm gonna go in with it. It maybe takes a little longer, but I feel like I have better control of it. And if your paint is thick, anytime you're doing lettering, you want your paint to be a little thinner so that it flows. It'll go a little further. So I like this detail brush because I can flatten it out when I'm doing the wide parts. And then all I do is just lighten up pressure to get the thinner lines. And sometimes my lines don't end up as thin as I would like them to. But when you're doing this, as long as you have some thick and some thin, and usually if you're doing it, you know, in a style like this, it's kind of a faux calligraphy. You want your downstroke to be thicker. So, you know, this would be up, and then this would be down, and then back up would be thinner, and then back down would be fatter. If that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. So when I'm going in a downstroke, what would be down if I was writing with a pen, I'm just going to put more pressure on my brush, let more of my brush touch the canvas, and then pull it up at the end of the letter. Now there are some people that are just super amazing at lettering, and they do it freehand and can do it fast. I generally need a template, and I'm generally pretty slow at it, so. Oh, you know what? I used a Sharpie on my F, so I will have to go back with a dark because I can't cover that Sharpie with this pink. Oh well, that's okay. We're gonna go ahead and see what the rest of it looks like anyway. sometimes your brush gets too full of paint to get to a point. So sometimes in the middle you have to wash your brush out and start over with loading up the paint. Oopsie. Sometimes I go through the letters and do all the thick downstrokes first, and then go back and do all the thinner ones. All right, so that's it. You kind of see it, the pink. It's kind of cute. I kind of like the pink. All right, and then there's the one with the black. So you guys can kind of decide what you like. Let's see if I can zoom out a minute for you. Oh, that's in. There we go. Oh, that's not a good shot. Don't really know what happened there. All right, so there's the pink, black lettering. All right, guys, like I said, if you have any questions or you're having any trouble getting something to look the way you want it, just send me a message and I will be happy to help. Thank you so much for painting with me. Have a great day.